Hello and welcome to Stand Up for Jehovah. Yesterday I did a video where I said that the only thing Jehovah's Witnesses were allowed to celebrate was the death of Christ's memorial, and I indicated that that was a little bit of a downer. But somebody reminded me that actually that's not true. They do celebrate other things, and of course, how could I forget the Kingdom Hall wedding? It was the event of the century when it happened. Back in the 1970s, when people were poor, the Kingdom Hall wedding consisted of a really long, boring talk at Kingdom Hall about a threefold cord that cannot be broken and the wife rendering her wifely dues. And then the whole congregation, plus 3 people who weren't Jehovah's Witnesses but had never been Jehovah's Witnesses, so you couldn't stop them coming, trooped down to the town hall and sat at trestle tables covered in white paper and duly ate a salad and boiled eggs. My 2 enduring memories of the 1970s Kingdom Hall wedding was the boiled eggs, which I seem to remember shelling about 1,000 of in the town hall kitchens, and then coating them with cream and this incredible new fancy newfangled powder that was red and spicy and what posh people had, paprika. It fell into the category of other things that posh people did. They also had mixer taps, dimmer switches, bungalows, cars, and went on holiday. That was just in my head. My other enduring memory of the town hall wedding was the kind of undercurrent. It wasn't really spoken, but it was there the whole time, this undercurrent of fna, that everybody knew that the bride and groom at some point in the evening were going to go off and do it for the first time ever. And that knowledge kind of permeated all the gaps and pauses of the conversation without anyone ever mentioning it. Of course, I was too young to know what it was, but I sure as hell knew that it would be done later on that evening. Of course, that was in the 1970s, before premarital sex had been invented, wasn't it? In the 1980s, Kingdom Hall weddings grew up a little bit. I remember going out on field service with a sister who was the daughter of an elder and about to be married to the son of a different elder. And she told me quite matter-of-factly that she wouldn't be wearing a white wedding dress because she'd already done it. But she'd found a lovely fornication cream dress that really took her fancy. I was 14. I had no idea that there were a whole set of rules around the colour coding of the dress to publicly announce the intactness or otherwise of your hymen. I genuinely was stunned at this news, and I thought, well, why could you not just choose the dress that you fancied and maybe wear a sign on your chest that said, "We've already done it," thereby saving everybody a whole afternoon's worth of fna jokes? And what about the groom? Did he have to wear some kind of colour-coded clothing to indicate that he'd also done it? Clearly not. I felt that it would have been intellectually honest of him if the groom had just worn a sign on his back that had a massive cock drawn on it. But obviously, doing it or not doing it were not the only sins that you could commit prior to your Jehovah's Witness wedding. Oh no, there was a continuum of sexy sin. You could go from just thinking about it to holding hands, to maybe kissing, to frottage, which was colloquially known as the J-dub rub, as I found out later. And I distinctly remember being interrogated before my own wedding by somebody, I can't remember who, as to whether there was anything that the great peeping Tom in the sky, Jehovah, might have noticed that we ought to confess about now that would cause him to withhold his spirit from our wedding. And of course, me and my intended, we had to admit that there was absolutely nothing at all that we'd done on the continuum of sexy sin, including not even thinking about it ever, just never letting the thought even entertain the possibility of crossing our minds. In fact, it begged the question why we were getting married at all, really. We could have just moved in as flatmates, couldn't we? So you can imagine my horror, really, and surprise on my wedding day, after about 2 hours of the fanar jokes in the gaps and pauses of everybody's conversations, that led me to the realisation that actually later on that evening I was going to be expected to do it. The very thing that for the past 20 years I'd been avoiding thinking about, dwelling on, or in any other way entertaining, because it would lead to my very real and certain killy death at Armageddon. This very same thing that would kill me for 20 years was transformed by the mere reciting of a ceremony into something that not only did I have to do, but I had to enjoy. I can tell you that is a very tall order to lay on a cat at a wedding. Of course, the best thing about Jehovah's Witness weddings were, as I've mentioned, the 3 non-Jehovah's Witnesses that attended. And of course, they weren't people that had been Jehovah's Witnesses, so you couldn't shun them or snub them or mark them in any way. You had to let them come because they were just relatives. But they didn't know the rules, did they? They didn't know the rules. They tried, but they really didn't know what to wear. They wore trouser suits or too short skirts or low-cut blouses, or they didn't close their eyes in the prayer. They didn't know the words to the songs about a 3-fold cord not being easily broken, and they had no idea what the wifely do was. No. I remember at one particular wedding I attended, one of the 3 requisite non-Jehovah's Witness attendees came in a purple satin trouser suit, such as was popular when Charlie's Angels was on TV. I kid you not, my eyes came out on stalks. I'd never seen a female wearing such brazen clothing in my life. Of course, I refused a trestle table wedding when I got married. My father-in-law was going to pay for the whole thing, and he had drawn up the guest list, and it basically looked like the Jehovah's Witness equivalent of the Masonic Temple attendance list. And I was quite, I don't know, headstrong or something, and I said, no, I don't want that. I don't want all your cronies at my wedding. And so as a punishment, he withdrew his financial aid, and we had to have fish and chips 24 times down at Robbie's chip shop up Ings Lane. Well, that's not quite what we had, but it wasn't far off. The other thing about my own Kingdom Hall wedding was that I was refused a Kingdom Hall wedding because I was marrying an unbeliever. I know, shocking to say the least. Can you believe it? I married an unbeliever. Well, I mean, when I say unbeliever, I'm talking about a 3rd generation born in Jehovah's Witness who attended all the meetings and went out on field service, whose brother-in-law and uncle were elders, and whose sister and brother-in-law were long-term residents at London Bethel, but he just neglected to get baptised, and so he was classed as an unbeliever. A special needs talk, is that what they call it? A special needs, a local needs talk, was given at our Kingdom Hall, advising everyone that if anybody attended our wedding, they would be henceforth castrated and killed at Armageddon. And it was quite a distressing thing. And so we had a registry office wedding, me and my unbelieving mate, who was a 3rd generation Jehovah's Witness. Of course, it really didn't notice too much that we only had 2 spindly cords and not Jehovah as the 3rd cord holding us together. And it actually made things a lot easier when we got divorced, because we only had to divide the assets 2 ways. So, thank you for listening to another episode of Stand Up for Jehovah.